How you doing?
I'm terrific, Scotty. Terrific, actually, yeah.
That's great. Where are you coming to us from right now? You in the city?
I am on 70th Street in Manhattan.
Oh, nice. You're off right now, right? You got a couple weeks dark, so you got some time to enjoy the New Year's, right?
So the first time ever, we're dark for 5 straight weeks.
The first time in the show's history?
Correct.
Wow.
Well, that is during the regular season, and we do nothing during the summer. But this is the first time we've had a stretch in the middle. That's primarily because we did 6 shows in a row. Also, the first time ever.
That was ending with the Chappelle show, right?
Correct.
Gotcha.
Yeah. We thought it was important for us to be on the air straight through till election time, and I guess it was.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I forgot who I was talking about this with, but I was waiting for that show, and then I forgot who was playing the football game right before it. Was like, I was so upset. I was waiting for the show to go on, and then it was like 5 minutes late, and then 10, and I think we ended up. I think we got like a 15-minute delay after, which is better than 2 hours. But I was so excited for that show, especially because was Biden's acceptance speech was right beforehand. Mm-hmm. So that was an incredible night, and especially because Chappelle coming back again for the same night 4 years later. That was a fantastic show.
And the announcement of his being declared winner had happened just a few hours before we started our final rehearsal, and that was a busy and electric day.
Yeah. Well, I have a million Saturday Night Live questions to ask, but before I do that, I want to go back in time and ask you about your whole career, with all the things that you've done. So first, I want to talk about, where are you from originally?
I grew up near Pittsburgh in a little town called Pitcairn, and went to Gateway High School, and was had a great childhood with terrific parents and 2 younger brothers, and Little League baseball, and just a perfect, pure Americana kind of upbringing.
Mm-hmm. And so, what was it, in that kind of pure Americana lifestyle that makes you say, I want to go into directing? Was that something that your family in show business at all?
Not at all. Both my brothers and I were attracted to public speaking and performing, but we were primarily athletes, however, and mm-hmm. we were going right from football to baseball to basketball every single year. And so we also did a little performing, some high school acting, and I had a little theater bug for a while. In fact, in 8th grade, I wasn't able to play basketball one year. I had trying to correct something in my back. And so I tried out for a play in Miss Bowden's curtain call club. And I got on stage and said a couple lines and got a couple laughs. And I said, I think I like this. And mm-hmm. So, I had a little stage struck for a while, and did some serious theater work. Miss Bowden would take 3 of us to New York City over the Easter break every year to see a Broadway play and to do a little touring of the city. And I convinced my parents that my 8th grade year I could go with Miss Bowden and 3 9th grade girls. And we went to see The Sound of Music and The Miracle Worker. And I left New York with a kind of a teenage crush on the city and on Broadway and on theater in general. And I think I decided in 8th grade that I was going to get back to New York and work in show business in some fashion as soon as I could. And it's kind of the way it happened.
Yeah,
I didn't become the actor I thought I would, but I did manage to sneak into show business.
Now, what was it? Because I also read that you wanted to go to West Point. When did that come into play, and why did you want to go there specifically?
My dad had a great experience in World War II as a soldier, and he thought it turned his life around. He developed a work ethic and a disciplinary, self-disciplinary lifestyle. And although he was in no way a military dad, he had great respect for it. And the fact that you go to West Point for free sounded pretty good. And I had been relatively successful as a high school scholar and had been the president of my class and had all of those things that made one think that he could get all the way to a West Point appointment. I thought that was where I was headed, and thought that I would by this point either be a general or dead. And I didn't even apply to any other schools. I was headed to West Point. By the time I was 17 and ready to actually apply, I was more interested in the fact they had a 125-pound football team that competed interscholastically, because the military part, and more importantly, the academic life in West Point is really geared toward engineering and science. And by that point, I was more interested in literature and theater and in political life. But I got 2 appointments on my way, I thought. And as I said, didn't apply anywhere else. And they went for a final physical, and they found something wrong with my back that they thought was genetic and that might pop up later in life and get in the way of my being a full-scale, long-range, lifetime military guy. And so they said, nah, you better not come here. And so I had to do a quick shuffle, ended up at Penn State, and I think in the long run, I'm better off.
And so you went to Penn State, and you graduated with a broadcasting degree, correct?
Correct.
And so what was it that, because you said that, you ended up going there and you had interest in both acting and directing. Was there a program for acting, and did you consider doing that when you went to college?
Yes, I considered it. Penn State has an excellent theater program, even better now. It's really highly ranked. At the time, though, it was a good department, but it was wide open to the rest of the university. You could audition for plays, no matter what your major was. And I think my first week, I wandered past their primary theater, saw a notice up on the board that auditions were happening for their first main stage production. And I went in and read and got a little role, and I got stage struck again. And I spent more time in the theater department than I did in the broadcasting department, and became a broadcasting major, not because I had any love or affinity for television, but because I didn't really have the guts to call myself an acting major, or tell my dad I was going to be an acting major. And I thought, well, broadcasting's a little more grounded and reliable, and I'll at least be able to. But I spent most of my time in the theater department. However, my senior year, in my final course in broadcasting, we were divided into groups, and we had to put on a television show. And I think I was assigned to be the producer of our show, and somebody else was the director, somebody else was the writer. And we came up with this plan to follow some group of students doing something. We were going to film them in their preparation for this project, whatever they were doing. And we were going to bring them all together in a live roundtable talk show about their project and insert these clips we had shot. And the guy who was assigned to direct it had no knowledge of how you really direct a live multiple camera television show. He put his headsets on. He said, "Take one." And I said, whoa, wait a minute. You got to roll tape first. We have to record this. He said, "Oh, yeah, okay. Roll tape. Ready, 1, take 4. No, I mean 3. No, wait. We don't have 4. Ready, 2? No, 2. Wait a minute. Which one's 2? And I said, well, let's stop. Let's try this again. Let me have those headsets. And I put the headsets on. And for the first time, I started to direct a live multiple camera television show. And I realized that I was barking orders very quickly and trying to get across what I wanted to this whole team of camera operators and audio people and lighting people. And I was anticipating what might happen next and making sure that I was covered in case that guy on the end started to talk. And I kept my eye on the clock and barking these orders. And a mistake happened. I quickly got by that mistake, move on, knowing that a mistake was could snowball into other things if you stop and say, wait a minute, how did that happen? Who made that? No. Just keep on going and make sure you stay in the moment. And when it was over, I thought, boy, that was a great adrenaline rush. And in fact, it's a familiar adrenaline rush. And I realized it's much like quarterbacking a football team. And I love that sense of being in charge and following the actions that happen, living with moments as they go. And I still get that same adrenaline rush on Saturday nights in Studio 8H. It is just a sense of a team coming together and going through a live experience where anything might happen and you deal with it and move along and you try to score touchdowns.
And do you think that part of that love for the adrenaline rush comes from the fact that if you screw up, you can't, I mean, of course you can cut it out in a replay, but with that kind of thing, when you're live, that people will know about it. Do you think that's where a big part of that adrenaline comes in? Because you don't have a safety net per se?
No doubt about it. That's exactly what it's all about. And there are a lot of people that hate that feeling. It's just too much pressure, and they're much more meticulous in how they work, and they don't want to face the danger of making a mistake in front of other people. But there are others like me who kind of like that rush, and it's very similar to an athlete's attitude.
I mean, 80% of the reason that I do this podcast live is because I like to nitpick things, and it becomes to the point where it's like, okay, I could make this 100% and no one will notice that it's anywhere past 60%. And it's only for me, and I end up being miserable about it. So half the reason I do it live is that I go, you know what? Got to move on. I did it. I did as best as I could, and the next thing is going to happen. So I know what you mean by like having that craving almost for, it forces you to be better, and it also gives you that excitement that you're not going to get when you can go through in Premiere and make sure everything's perfect in post.
Maybe you should be a television director.
I've always been a huge fan of live television.
Mm-hmm.
And like SNL was a huge thing in my childhood. We had all the best of DVDs when I was a kid, and the Christmas DVDs and all that stuff. And I've always considered going into television in some form, because I actually, funny enough, you talk about going to college and being embarrassed about saying, hey, I'm an acting major. Yeah. I go to college for music, and whenever people say, what do you go to college for? I always go, I really don't want to say, because it's embarrassing, especially now that there's no gigs. And I'm like, well, how, you have to, because then you have to follow up with, well, how am I, they're always going to say, well, what do you want to go into? So I always lie and I say I'm a music business major. And I'm going into, I always say like, oh, I want to work for Sony or Columbia or Universal Records or something like that, which I would, but it sounds better than saying, oh, I'm a performance major. So I know what you mean, come from that.
Yes. Or if that doesn't work out, by the way, you could become an NFL quarterback.
I'll be the I don't know. I don't know football enough to say who would be the scrawniest person related to a football team. I guess I'll be the audio engineer doing the broadcast.
All right.
But wait, so that first experience you have with directing, what year is that? That's while you're still in college, right?
That was still in college, yes. That was a long time ago. That was 69.
Okay, so when was it that you started working officially as a director and started becoming your actual profession?
Just a few weeks after that. I didn't have the guts to move to New York and be a struggling actor, and I thought, well, I do have this affinity for television and television directing. Let me give that a shot. And I managed to get a job before I graduated, a job at the local station that was affiliated with Penn State, and I was assigned to be the assistant to a director who was directing a music and art series. And 2 weeks after I got there, he quit. He got a job in Philadelphia and moved on. And the executive producer said, this is bad timing, man, because I'm about to go on a 2-week vacation that I've been planning for a year. So look, take these 2 weeks, do whatever you can to pick up the pieces of what he did or what you saw that he was working on, and see what you can get done in 2 weeks. And when I get back, I'll start the search for a full-time director. Well, I thought to myself, this might just be my chance here. And I kind of said, I'm going to do everything I can to tie up all those loose ends and try to finish those little projects he was doing and redo some interviews and edit together some of the film he had shot. And I learned things I had to know just about 30 seconds before I had to know it, just to get it done, lie my way through it. And the executive producer got back. He said, I can't believe you did this much in 2 weeks. He said, I'll tell you what, I'm going to take a chance on you. I'm going to make you the director. And so I was a full-scale television director 2 weeks into my career.
Wow.
You know,
You won the lottery, basically.
I did. Well, I won several times, but that was the first win. Yes.
And what's the technology like back then? Because I genuinely don't know in terms of all this. Because nowadays you have all the digital systems. How are you directing a TV show in 1969 or the early 70s in comparison to how you would do it now?
Well, I think the most important thing I can say is that the station itself was a black and white station. Everything was in black and white. We had no color equipment at all. It was the the techniques, the vocabulary, the approach, the attitude were very much the same, and it was a matter of putting that team together and trusting what they're doing and barking those orders quickly and anticipating what might happen next. And all of that was the same and is the same. And I learned a great deal, and 10 months later said, I think I'm ready to move on. And I went to a little UHF station in San Jose, California, probably the worst station in the country in terms of its production abilities and its and the way it was staffed. They didn't have enough programming to sign on until 3 p.m. Had no newscast, had no newscast, and had Spanish programming during the weekends. But as a result, I got to do a little bit of everything else, and I ran camera and did audio, and I was a videotape operator and directed a lot of live teenage dance shows and Spanish used car commercials.
Did you have a specialty going into those jobs, saying like I'm a obviously you can direct anything that's live, but was there a thing like a specific type of show that you were either really good at or really interested in directing?
I found the challenge of multiple camera directing the most challenging and the most rewarding, and I think what I was most suited for. And so there were only 3 cameras in that studio, and we did just turned out an unbelievable amount of content. None of it very good, but it was all that's similar groundwork to what I needed to fill out my toolkit and have that set of skills that it took to just get stuff on tape or on the air.
And you had such an incredible break with that first job, and then you go to San Jose. Where is it in your career that you think you had like your big break that really is what propelled you into doing higher quality programs and stations and working there?
Right at that point, you're following this timeline in great sequence. In my senior year, back to that same time when I first directed that live show, I had an internship at KDKA television and radio in Pittsburgh. And that internship was a great one. I was assigned to a different department every single week. And so I got to know how a station runs. And although it was a big union station, they still were willing to let the kids do some things. And I was in television news one Saturday morning, and they had run out of reporters. And they got a call that there had been a robbery on the north side. And they looked around, they had no reporters left. And one camera crew sitting there waiting for an assignment. And they said, hey, Don, is Don right? Don, take that camera crew and go over to the north side and cover this robbery. Well, here I was, an intern assigned to actually report on a robbery that had a great little twist to it, and the story made it onto air. And here I was, an intern with this great exposure covering my own news story. The following week, I was in radio promotion, and they were writing promos for the disc jockeys. And I raised my hand. I said, "Can I throw a couple ideas out?" They said, yeah, sure. So I wrote a couple of promos, and they accepted them. And there I was, sitting with these big-time disc jockeys, getting them to record their promotional announcements that I had written. It was a fabulous experience, a great opportunity, a great learning experience. The following week, I was in television promotion. And that was probably what I thought the only week of the internship, because they were filming a whole series of promotions for the new fall season. And they had hired a jingle writer and a choreographer to make these little 1-minute promos about the shows that were going to be on CBS come fall. And so I we had this big production meeting the day before we were to go out, and the production manager said, "Does anybody here drive a stick shift?" And I raised my hand. I said, "Yeah, I can do that." He said, "Oh, good," because we rented a camper to be sort of a traveling dressing room for the dancers, because we're going to take these dancers out to Pittsburgh landmarks and film these little 1 minute spots. And so I spent that whole week driving this camper around the city. I couldn't even go on set. I had to stay with the camper out in the parking lot. I couldn't even go on set to watch them film these promos. Every once in a while, I would carry a carton of Cokes in to give to the dancers. But at the end of that week, I thought, well, I kind of wasted my time there. But after I went went back to school, graduated, had that first job at Penn State, second job in California. I called the manager. I said, when I left, I said I would do anything to get back here to get a job and ask you for advice. And you told me to just get some experience in the real world and then give you a call. Well, I'm calling because I did that. I got experience at 2 different stations. Is there any job for me there at KDKA? And he said, "Don King, I'll tell you the truth. I just can't place you." I said, "Well, I'm the intern that covered that story on the north side. I'm probably the only intern ever got to actually be a reporter on site." He said, "I'm sorry. We get a lot of interns come through. I just cannot place you." I said, "Well, when I was in radio, I wrote promos for every one of the disc jockeys that got on the air." And he said, "Wait a minute, Don King." He said, "Are you the kid that drove the stick shift?" Yeah, I did that. He said, "You were great at that." He said, "You know what? I do have a job for you. If you want to come back for the summer, you can be the producer of Pirate Baseball. We only cover about 20 games through the year, but I need somebody to sit beside the anchorman in the various parks and be in contact with the control room back in Pittsburgh and tell them when you're commercial, when you're back from commercial, feed them promotional announcements." And I got to travel with the Pirates for those 20 games, got to work with Bob Prince and the play-by-play team. And it was by far the most exciting job I had ever had. At the end of the season, they kept me on to do the same thing for Steeler football. And then they kept me on to become a director where I directed morning news. And then I got to direct telethons and some documentaries. And then they started a weekly magazine show that I produced and directed and wrote and occasionally hosted. It was by far the biggest leap in my career. And it was all because I could drive a stick shift.
Isn't it kind of, it works out great, but isn't it kind of, life is kind of a sick joke that you do all this work and then no one cares about that, but it's driving a stick shift and that's what people notice.
Yeah, in some ways it's sick. In some ways it's maybe the way life should be. That if you pay attention to all the little details and believe in a work ethic and just do what you can and do the best you can, things will work out. And I'll look at it that way.
Yeah, and now, were there any times in your career that you had done all these great things? Were there any things that you were maybe there's the possibility of you working for any stations, any shows that you thought was going to be like a massive game changer, and then it was going to do like a massive rocket in your career that ended up not working out as you had planned?
I directed a show called the Mike Douglas Show in Philadelphia. It was a daytime talk show, and it was a major show. It was sort of like Ellen's, like Ellen today. And I was way over my head, and it took me a couple of months to get to the point where I felt comfortable doing it. Big time performers, and Mike had a co-host every week, and the biggest names in show business, Red Skelton and Jerry Lewis co-hosted, and John Lennon and Yoko Ono hosted one week, and it was a remarkable opportunity. And I thought for sure that would be the springboard to the big time. And Mike decided to leave Philadelphia and move the show to L.A. And when that happened, there was a little shakeup, and I got a call from a guy I knew in New York saying, "Come back." He's a guy who started Good Morning America. He was moving on to NBC to start a daytime show, and it would be a similar kind of multicast look at the world and he asked me to come back to direct it. I thought that would be the big break. It was network now, not just syndicated. It was New York again. It was NBC, and it was at the same time they were starting a show called it was called Saturday Night Live, and so I thought, yeah, I want to be in that building, and it was called America Alive. Well, America Alive was alive for about 6 months, and it was an embarrassing flop. And I suddenly, for the first time in my life, not only was headed for a big network career, I was out of work. And that was perhaps the clearest example of what you're talking about. I had big hopes for it, and it flopped. On the other hand, that led me to direct morning television, and I did Good Morning America and CBS This Morning for a total of 21 years, and it was a really solid and rewarding career. However, at the end of that 21 years, I thought, I kind of sold out on my dream. I wanted to be in show business, and these shows are good and challenging and rewarding, and I'm pretty good at it, but it's really not show business. Those shows are designed to tell you whether to take an umbrella to work in the morning, and the world didn't blow up overnight, and your team won last night, and here's a new recipe you can learn, and a couple of fashion shows. We had a lot of live music, and that was the closest we got to show business, but it wasn't really making people laugh and clap. It was informative television. And I got a call after that 21 years was about over, got a call from a guy I'd worked with on America Live at NBC, who went right after it flopped. He went to become the AD of that show called Saturday Night Live. And he said, Don, he said, the director, we've only had 2 directors on this show, and the woman who's directing it now she announced in the spring that she's quitting. And this is a summertime, and we haven't found anybody to fill her seat. Would you be interested in it? And I said, Bob, there's no show I would rather direct. I mean, that really is pure show business. That is designed to make people laugh and clap and think and feel and affect the world. But I've never directed sketch comedy before. I've directed every kind of show that Saturday Night Live makes fun of. I've directed tons of news. I can direct comedy news, and I've certainly done live music. And I've probably directed more live television in general than anybody in the history of television. 21 years of 2 hours every single morning probably puts me up there in the top of the ranks. And he said, well, just send your reel in here. I said, I don't have a reel. I've never put together samples of things I've done. Plus, there's nothing on those reels that would show anything about the real heart of Saturday Night Live sketch comedy. He said, well, bring stuff in and I'll put it together here. So I went to Saturday Night Live with a lot of little tapes of stuff I'd done over the years, and he put together a little sample reel, and it went to the executive producers and to Lorne, and I got a call saying the producers want to meet you. And I went to that meeting, and they told great stories about the inside of how Saturday Night Live gets done, and sounded so challenging and rewarding and fascinating in so many ways. But it also was clear that they needed somebody who could do what they do. Somebody had a little experience staging actors in little one-act plays and shooting them in ways that captured the comedy. And I really did not have that background.
Well,
so I left that meeting.
What about you had done, I think, like 4 Broadway shows for Broadway Worldwide by that point, right?
Yeah.
So you think that was, you don't see that as being a good, I guess, preemptive thing before Saturday Night Live, for lack of a better term?
It was, but I didn't stage those musicals. I captured them as they happen on stage in front of live audiences. And I took pride in that skill and had gotten better at it over those 4. And I think I did justice to those musicals. But those musicals weren't my. I didn't start from scratch and say you start here, enter here, exit there. I just captured what was there. And it was, I don't minimize that effort, and I don't minimize that skill. I took pride in that, and I think I got pretty good at that too. But that's not Saturday Night Live. Saturday Night Live actually starting from scratch with a blank stage, and you talk to the set designers about how to fill that up, and the prop people about where to put chairs, and you talk to special effects people where they're going to fly in from the ceiling, and then choreograph cameras around that to capture it and do justice to the comedy. That's a separate set of skills, and I did not have that same skills. But I met with this producer and one of the other two of the producers, and had a great meeting of just hearing the stories of what an amazing operation Saturday Night Live is. But once again, walked out thinking, well, they clearly need somebody who knows how to do that. Took my daughter this was the end of the summer of 2006. Took my daughter to Disney World and got a call down there saying, Lorne Michaels wants to talk to you. I said, we'll be back tomorrow. He said, all right, come in tomorrow. And I sat down with Lorne, and for about 45 minutes, he talked about how he hated the fact that he had to go through this transition again. Wasn't sure he even wanted to if he had to break in another director. And it was very clear that he wanted somebody who could pick it up quickly and duplicate the way it looked and just fit into the enormous process, the well-oiled machine that Saturday Night Live is. And I really knew I couldn't do that. And didn't matter that I knew, because I never got to say much. He talked mostly about things he was unhappy with. And he said, you directed the Mike Douglas show, right? I said, yeah, I did do that. He said, okay, it was great to meet you. And well, I'm not sure he said that, but he did shake my hand, and that was it. And I walked out again thinking, oh man, it was great to get that far, but it's clear that he doesn't want to go with somebody inexperienced. I got a call the next day. They said, well, we're going to take a chance on you. Come in and do a couple shows, and we'll see what happens, because we're kind of desperate.
Did they give you a period of time to watch Beth Miller direct before you came in, or did you basically get like a very short period of time?
I got a very short period of time. I got reviews. I got the last season to review, and Beth did come by and sat with me for the first 2 weeks of prep, and she sat in the back of the control room through both of those two shows, and she was enormously helpful, and she was clearly sympathetic with my deer in the headlights approach to it all, because she had gone through it herself. So she was lovely and helpful, but there was only so much that she could do. However, I again sort of learned what I had to know about 30 seconds before I had to know it through that first season and for the first couple of seasons. And there were times when I said, I just don't know how to do this. But backing up for a moment, there was a time when they first offered me the job when I thought, I certainly have said often that there's no other show I would rather direct, but I don't know that I want to feel butterflies in my stomach again. I don't know if I want to go into a situation where I am expected to have answers that I don't have, where I could easily fail, where I'll be in the spotlight so bright that I might say, please, I can't take the heat of the spotlight. And I thought, I'm pretty good at what I do now, and I'm rewarded for it. I don't know if I want to feel that anxiety again.
Were you thinking that maybe since you're in such a spotlight that if you mess up, you might not be able to work again in that level of the industry because might get blacklisted in some way? Were you worried about that at all?
Absolutely. Of course, I also thought, well, if I do fail, I can come back to do this kind of work at least. I do have a body of work and the respect of others that I can do morning talk shows at least. But I thought that this is a chance that my show business dreams will be crushed. But I also thought, there's no worse feeling than worse emotion than regret. And I thought, what will happen? I'll come back and I'll play it safe. And a couple of years from now, I'll say, oh man, maybe I could have done that, or why didn't I give it a shot? And I thought, all right, I'll stick my neck out, and if I do fail, I will come back to this kind of work. And man, I'm so glad I took that risk, because the past 15 years have been by far the most rewarding, satisfying on every level. And yeah, it was a steep mountain to climb, and it was a hard learning curve. And there are still times when I say, I'm not sure how to do that. I'm not sure how to do justice to this live, and to sell the comedy, and to put the punchline in the right place visually, and the fact that it all comes together in 4 days is still nightmarish, and still beyond my comprehension of how it all happens so quickly and so smoothly. But nevertheless, I am so glad I took the chance of failing.
And when you get to that first show, what is it? Because if I was in that situation, I would have been crapping my pants. So what is it specifically in that first show that you are the most concerned about and you think is the most viable threat to you actually failing in this job?
I had no idea, despite the fact Beth told me, and despite the fact others had explained how the process. I had no idea how quickly and how often the basic Saturday Night Live script changes. There's nothing on paper until Wednesday, but after those selections were made of what sketches were actually going to mount, I thought, okay, this is my blueprint here, and I'll work on it shot by shot, and I will at least have my blueprint down. Maybe that blueprint is wrong in some places. Maybe I made a wrong decision about a camera selection at some point, but at least I'll know, and I'll be able to just call shots, and then we can decide later whether that really did justice to the work. But then by the time it gets to Saturday morning and we start to do a run through, I say, well, this is completely different. And even each one of these shots now, this should be a 2-shot. And wait a minute, this character's not even in the sketch anymore. And there are major changes, and I'm trying my best to make those changes and get those changes to the camera operators and the technical director and all of the other support people. I mean, even the sound effects guy, some of his sound effects have changed, and how am I going to let him know all of that? Well,
is that Jeff Countryman, the sound effects guy?
No, the sound effects guy is Bill.
I apologize. I didn't mean to put you on the spot. The only reason I say it is because I know a teacher of mine, Jeff Countryman, does some of the sounds for the show, and so I was wondering if that was him.
No, this is the guy, Bill Taylor, who does the sound effects live, and it turns out that the music cues and lighting cues and the tape rolls and the slide sequences all are done by brilliant sort of self-starters who just operate on their own in many cases, and just they follow the scripts, and they know where the changes are, and they keep up with it, and they take the pressure off the director from calling everything. Of course, I didn't know that at the time, but I then discovered that after the rehearsal that we do on Saturday in preparation for the dress rehearsal, there are additional script changes that the writers make based on what they saw in the first rehearsal that day. And so now I'm getting additional changes, new write-ins, and new chunks of dialogue, and I have to incorporate that into my master plan just for the dress rehearsal. But the biggest nightmare of all is between dress rehearsal and air, where the entire show is reorganized, where 2 or 3 sketches are thrown out entirely, where everything else has been juggled to play in different places in the show. And within those sketches, there are major changes, revisions, cuts, new rewrites in almost every single sketch. So that was eye-opening, and by far the scariest part of every Saturday night.
When they give you those cuts, Now, you didn't write the sketch, you're just directing it. But do you ever say when someone comes in like, "Oh, we need to cut this." Do you ever say, maybe not this, but something else because this is more important? Do you ever give input like that, or do you just basically take what they give you and then try to fit it into the time limit?
I'll give input with that, not based on what's more important or what's funnier or what's better for the sketch. That's entirely up to Lorne and the writers. But I will say, wait a minute, I just can't get from this effect to that effect without two lines in the middle here, or I can't get this. Camera 3 has a single of Fred and a single of Bobby, and so if you cut it out that middle section, I can't get I can't get those singles. You have got to put something back in there to make that transition. I'll give feedback like that.
And while the show's going on, is this like you have 10 minutes to do this, 5 minutes to do this? Is it within, a couple minutes of airtime that you're making these cuts and during the actual runtime?
Sometimes it is, sometimes it's while we're on the air. Sometimes it's in a commercial break. We'll go into the dress rehearsal with as much as 20, 30 minutes more material than we actually need, giving Lauren the freedom to pull out a couple of sketches entirely, to rejuggle the show, to cut down week one update, or even to change a sketch. And each one of those writers will come back with mostly time cuts. But then we'll go into the air show with as much as 5 or 6 minutes more material than we need, knowing that as we get down to the end, from weekend update on, there'll be internal cuts being made, or a sketch being thrown out, or a field piece, a digital short or a commercial parody that may have to be struck entirely from the show. And therefore, the end of the show might be reordered a bit. And there are times when in the last commercial, I'll be handed a script with dialogue crossed out or a whole page crossed out or a new ending, and we'll have to just do that on the fly.
And so that dress rehearsal, it's a 2-hour rehearsal, so that's an extra half an hour, right, of material? And then, so that's 8 to 10, and there's an hour and a half to cut down that extra half an hour. Are you in the control room that whole time, or do you get any time to walk around, eat, use the bathroom, or are you just basically that whole hour and a half just grinding out stuff to make sure the airtime is actually correct?
At 10 o'clock or even 10:15 when dress rehearsal ends, I'll quickly meet. I'll get notes from Lorne, who's stood beside an assistant throughout the entire dress rehearsal, feeding notes about make this change or cut that, or I hated the lighting, or make that set green instead of blue. So at 10:15, I'll get those notes, including shots or opening tapes or new animations, and meet with the stage managers and have a quick meeting about those notes. And then I'll get called up to Lauren's office, where he will be juggling the show and talking to the host and the entire writing staff about how best to fill out the show. And then we'll walk out of that meeting at 10:45, maybe 10:50, now with the actual order and with my script that has been changed, and there'll be 100 Post-its in it. And every page, I turn the page and the page is crossed out, and turn the page, new jokes written in a year. Turn the page and see a character has been cut entirely from a sketch, and I turn the page and be a new ending. So I meet with the camera operators at 11 o'clock, and I go through with them as quickly as I can to try to make shot changes on their shot sheets. And I'll say, all right, camera 2, kill shot 4 and kill shot 9, and make shot 10 a 2-shot. And wait a minute, can't be a 2-shot because that character's been cut entirely. Make it a single. Just make shot 22 a single, and do my best to get those changes to them. Of course, that entire time I'm cursing Lorne Michaels under my breath for putting us through that, because we have been so careful and meticulous and get each of those shot changes to every one of those operators, and they know exactly what they've got to shoot at what time. But now they're erasing and they're rewriting, and then they go out to the floor at 11:15, and 11:30 we fly. And of course, an hour and a half later, I will inevitably shake my head and say, Lorne was right. That sketch was funnier after Weekend Update, and that new ending really worked. And getting rid of that last big chunk of dialogue and that character at the end, and made the sketch much tighter. And he's an amazing guy, just brilliant at understanding how sketch works in front of a live audience, and what's wrong with it and how to fix it in a short period of time.
I mean, the amount of times that show, with the executives giving Lauren trouble, and he always pulled it out, for what is this? Is this season 46 or
Yeah.
45? 46? 46 seasons. It's amazing that he's been able to, against every type of adversity that you could possibly have producing a show, he's always pulled it out. So Lauren is amazing at what he does.
And he's driven. You would think that after this amount of time, he would be coasting a little bit. He'd say, "Oh well, that'll be all right. By the time we get to Saturday, we can fix that." Or now we've done that kind of sketch before. I put that in. That'll be a little padding for us. That'll be easier to do. No, his stomach is in a knot every single week. He is insistent that it be the best it can be, no matter what it is, no matter who the host is, no matter what is working and isn't working in a dress rehearsal. He wants it to be the best it can be and insists on it. I have great respect for a man who just refuses to coast. He said, I heard him say one time that if this show becomes a nostalgia show, the people walk and say, "Oh, we used to watch this in college. Let's see what they're up to now." And they sit there and say, "Hey, not as good as it used to be." But no, he says, if it becomes a nostalgia show, he'll walk away from it. He wants it to be cutting edge every week, to hold people accountable every week, and to not just make people laugh and clap, but to make them think and to offend the people that should deserve being offended.
And on that topic of being cutting edge, you guys were one of the first shows to do an at-home version. Of course, Fallon, Seth Meyers, Jimmy Kimmel, they all did it, but you guys were one of the first people to really adapt your show for quarantine. What were the challenges of doing that? And were you, I guess, what's the right word for this? As a very loud motorcycle goes by my house. Oh my Lord. Well, you live in New York City, you know what's up. What were your biggest concerns about adapting the show to an at-home version? And were you trying in any way to say, like, maybe it's a good idea or maybe it's not?
I believe firmly that it was not a good idea. I didn't say that, but I felt that. And quite frankly, I thought, wait a minute, why don't we just do our show the way we normally do it and fill the audience with people who have already contracted the virus? I said they can't make each other any sicker, and they could use the entertainment. Plus, I'll be down the hall in a locked control room, but apparently the cast and crew didn't see it my way. So Lauren made the announcement that we're going to try to do some shows remotely. They'll all be on tape. They'll all be shot independently and individually by cast members and some of the field producers in their homes. And I thought, that's a mistake. That will not work. There's no way that'll be Saturday Night Live. That will be a pale imitation. There'll be no live laughter. It can't work. And I really was against it. Additionally, I was going to have nothing to do with it because I couldn't be on set. I couldn't be even sitting with an editor. And the fact is, we have a whole team of excellent field producers and directors who know how to do that stuff, who do it every week. And we have cast members who came up that way, who've been making online shows of their own, online sketches. Well, I sent out a long memo about framing and audio and lighting, and I didn't know that it would be helpful. Turns out it wasn't. They knew a lot. They knew more than I know about how to do that properly. And then the first show was much better than I thought it would be. It had some rough edges, but I was impressed. But I wasn't involved. The second show was infinitely better, and the third show was terrific. And I sent out another memo saying, "Hey, I have never been more proud of a show I had nothing to do with." And I think it was Saturday Night Live. It was a different vibe to it, but it still was topical, and it was important, and it did hold people accountable, and it was funny, and I was impressed, but at the same time very eager to get back to the way we do it.
And when you
is got major COVID protocols that affect us, but I think we've done okay.
And when you did come back, was there a big adjustment period where you're trying to make the show work, especially because it is a televised show, but with comedy and especially, stand-up comedy, and when you're in front of people, the audience makes a big difference in terms of, how jokes are said and how people can feed off the crowd. Did you have to account for that because the audience was, I'm presuming, smaller, and because people have masks on and they're separated? Did that come into play, and did you really consider that?
Oh, we were worried about it, but I think it wasn't an issue. Yes, there were fewer people, and they were scattered, and still are. And yes, wearing masks, but just for the audience to be in a live audience, even though they were spread apart, I think they loved being there. Cast members were thrilled that there were actually live people out there who were responding instantaneously to punchlines. And I don't think anyone thought, oh, it was good, but it wasn't the same, or it was just too sparse, or I wish it had been more people. I think we managed to overcome that.
And how long did it take for you to come back and say, okay, it's back to normal? I know you said it wasn't a huge thing on your mind, but after that summer, which you weren't off too much longer than you would have been in a regular season break, correct?
Yeah.
But when you came back, when was it that period where you didn't think about it? You didn't think that anything was different. Was it right off the bat?
Well, the production protocols do still affect us. I block sketches with stand-ins first, so the cast doesn't have to spend as much time on set, and so I get my basic choreography of people and cameras down before we bring them in, and then we spend less time with the real cast. Now, in and of itself, that takes longer to do, and everyone is masked. And when I go out on the floor, I wear not only a mask but a shield. And we're very conscious of, and we've got protocol, COVID protocol people, safety officers there, making sure that we follow the rules. And so the rules do hinder us a little bit. We have fewer people allowed in the control room. We can't have I used to have a PA who would stay with me through every one of those changes that I talked about forever before. Every time I made a change, I'd give it to this production assistant who would take it back and make copies for the AD and for the switcher, for the tech, for the switcher. And so without that person, it's a little more cumbersome, and the fewer people in the control room is a little more cumbersome, and the entire process is slower. But I think the real answer is we're not cutting corners in terms of what we attempt, the production values, the special effects that we throw in, and the people there are the best at what they do, and it's amazing to see how they've adapted so quickly, efficiently, and without much complaint.
Is there any talk about when, especially once we don't know for sure, but hopefully during the summer we'll get this vaccine? I mean, knock on wood. Is there any talk on how if the show is going to go right back to normal pretty quickly after everyone is vaccinated and we're not worried about the coronavirus anymore? Or are there certain things that you think should be taken over from the new process and kept throughout the rest of the production?
Well, on a larger scale, I would say that there are things we've learned, not just in television but in theater too, that we should think about and meld into our process. Everyone I know says, when can we get back to doing things the way we used to do them, especially people in theater? And I say, I'm not sure that is the question. I think maybe the question is, how can we use what we've learned in this process to do what we do better? And it's not just communication and Zoom meetings and working from home. It's also I watched back in March. I watched a production that the Public Theater did. Uh, there's a whole series about one family of plays that were written about this family up in Rhinebeck and how they adapted to current events. And it was really smart. And I got to know that. I got to see all of those plays live at the Public. And then they announced in April they were going to do another version of that family on Zoom, as if all the family were quarantined. And I thought, this is going to be a pale imitation. This is not going to be the same. I'm not going to fall in love with this family again and care so much about them if I'm not seeing them live in person, interacting. And well, I didn't watch it in the theater in that big dark room with a couple of hundred people. I watched it just like this on my laptop all by myself. But it was just as moving and just as viable and just as important as theater as any of the other in the same series. And I thought, I'll bet 70 years ago, people sat in a room and said, hey, they've invented this thing called television. And what can we do with it? And I'll bet most of those people said, that we can't tell stories on television. Tiny little black and white screen with these fuzzy little figures, and there's no live audience and no live orchestra. We can't do that. But I'll bet there was somebody in that room that said, something, why don't we give it a shot? Why don't we try to make a hat where there was no hat? Why don't we try to use this medium to tell stories in different ways? And television now is a viable medium for storytelling, and it's not the big screen, and it's not live on a stage, but it's an important and valued way to tell stories. So maybe we'll be back to live multiple camera television in the old way. Maybe we'll be back to big screens in theaters, but there may also be a Zoom channel too that finds a way to show us about ourselves and to tell human stories.
Yeah, I've been really interested following, all the changes that people have made, especially, large productions, major studios, seeing the ways that they've adapted, and also seeing the ways that regular people, when they had 6 months of nothing to do, how they adapted and the types of the content and entertainment that they were making. And I think is as awful of a time this past year has been, and who knows how this next year will be, it's one of those times that when you're really forced, it's like that thing about that, when you're doing something live and it could go wrong, when you're forced into a corner, it's cool to see the stuff that comes out of it, because sometimes things that you never knew would happen are now, in 10 years will become the standard. And I love kind of seeing that stuff. And I've been very fortunate that I've been healthy this year, and I get to enjoy all the mediums that are coming out. And I don't know, I enjoy that fact of it, even though, nobody would prefer this to happen. Everyone would prefer that we were just doing everything normally, but it at least gives you hope to see those kind of changes being made.
I can't imagine sitting down and watching what you do 20 years ago. This wouldn't have even been a concept to me. But now it clearly is valuable communication and valuable connection, and it explores things that haven't been explored in ways that I find valuable.
I mean, when I was a kid, the idea of I remember there was Ustream.tv was the streaming place. And that was like, you could hook up your webcam on your MacBook and stream to the internet. And that was the craziest thing to me. And if you had told me, 9 years later, I could do, using, a professional camera and multicam and wiring a mic into my computer, I would have been blown away. And now that there's so many people doing this kind of thing, I think I'm hoping that kind of pushes technology further and it incentivizes the companies to keep pushing this kind of stuff, because, for me, that would be very nice. So I'm being a little selfish about it. Hey, but Don, before I let you go, I have a couple questions. I asked people on Reddit, on the Live from New York subreddit, for some questions. If you don't mind, could I ask you a couple of them?
Sure.
Cool. So the first one comes from a user, Solid as Barack, who says, obviously using cue cards reduces the risk of issues with teleprompters, but have you ever had tech issues that occur live that had to be worked around?
Yeah, it's primarily related to cue cards and
I think they just mean anything with Saturday Night Live. They're just saying how the cue cards reduce risk, but if there have been other types of technical issues that you've had to work around during the show.
Well, when I first started, I thought, oh, why aren't we using teleprompters? And why are we using this giant crane that has been replaced by a jib in most cases, which is a remote camera up on an arm, and it's operated by just one guy on the floor. It doesn't take as much food and has a lot of visual flexibility. But I came to realize that the old-fashioned part of Saturday Night Live is partly what makes it work too. If we're using teleprompters, the teleprompters are mostly mounted on the lens of the camera, so that when you read the teleprompter, it looks like you're staring right at the lens. And most of the time, we're doing sketches where we want to create the illusion that the actor is not looking at the lens, but looking at the character, the actor he's playing with. And so we put the cue cards over here, and then those cue cards can move when he turns to address the whole audience, and then they can move back when he's talking to this person. Or it might be there are two sets of cue cards, so he can look here and he can look away and grab some dialogue over here and look back. And we have an amazing cue card department. They keep up with all those changes I talked about earlier. I have no idea how they do it. They manage to make those changes happen on multiple sets every single show. And they just know how to keep that eye line, keep the illusion of the eye line in play. The fact that the show is live and not even on a 5-second delay means that there are things that can happen, and a slide chain can die, or a change to a shoulder graphic and weekend update could change to the wrong cartoon over a shoulder. We've had sets that don't quite get finished at the last minute in a 2-minute commercial break, and we've had times when a set, the support of a flat broke off, and there's a guy behind it holding it, trying to keep it from falling down into the set.
Didn't that happen during a dress run for a Bill Hader sketch? Didn't Justin Bieber almost get hit by a set falling piece? It was like the Big Daddy sketch, or I can't remember the name of it.
Right. That was in a commercial break in the set change. We had one before that, though, where Fred Armisen was playing a guy who was doing his own talk show from his home, and that set piece broke and it started to waver, and there were 3 guys behind it trying to hold on to it, and you can see it waver a little bit behind Fred when we first started the sketch, and you hear the audience laugh because the live audience is sitting there watching and they know what's happening, and so they're laughing at something the people at home don't quite understand, but something like that. A missed shot or a camera that goes into another camera's shot happens often, or too often, and yet I guess that's part of the joy of watching it live and knowing that anything could happen, but most of the time nothing wayward does.
This next question comes from Noah RR, who says, throughout your tenure, what has been the biggest change or evolution within SNL since 2006, and how has it evolved? And he also says, King is a legend.
Well, he may be thinking of Billie Jean King. I think when I mentioned the crane and I mentioned the cue cards, there is no other show left over like Saturday Night Live that has so many basic fundamentals of old-time television that are still done this way and done well this way, and I'm just so joyful that I got the chance to be a part of this for the last 15 years. It is pure live television in every sense. There are no robotic cameras, and that crane that I mentioned is operated by 4 guys, a brilliant camera operator who sits in a bucket, and 2 guys who handle the arm of it, and another guy that sits in the back who drives it. And it's a big cumbersome piece, but they move it around brilliantly and they make it fly and swoop and they fit in between the audience and they'll go up and handle a major sketch where they're tucked in and they're doing all the close-ups, and it's just amazing to be a part of those artists. We have the best scenic artists and the best prop guys and the most amazing stage crew. They're like the Rockettes. They're choreographed in how they set up and strike sets, and to just sit back and realize that I play a little part of it in this team. It does feel like we're an all-star football team.
And it all ties back. Here, I got one more thing. This is from me. And I saved this for the end because this might be an absolutely ridiculous question. But when the show starts, right after the call letters for NBC, there's like a second and a half of what sounds like canned laughter before the cold open. Why is that there? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I do. I'm only aware of it. I'm only aware of it when I watch reruns. What happens is, and in reruns now they include that in the vintage shows that air at 10 o'clock. They show this part of it where you hear the countdown, and I'm not sure who started it. I'm not sure which stage manager is responsible for it. I think it's our current one of our current stage managers who do the work of 12 stage managers. They're amazing. But Chris Kelly does one loud countdown that's designed for the audience, where he will say 10 seconds, and then when he says 5 seconds, he breaks. 5 seconds. His voice breaks as if he's nervous. Oh my God, we're about to start this, and that triggers the laugh, and that gets a live laugh from the studio audience, just as we fade up on the beginning of the cold open.
I always love that part, but I've always heard that and I've gone, whoa, is someone telling jokes right beforehand? So that's great to know. I appreciate it. Well, Don, I also appreciate you coming on to my show. I appreciate it literally so much. Thank you so much for your time.
I enjoy it all, and I'm impressed with what you do, and keep doing it.
Thank you so much. And to everyone who listened, thank you so much. This podcast will be on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. Replay will be up, clips from the show. Just so you guys know, there's an additional guest this month. Becca Stevens will be on the 15th, as well as on January 22nd. We'll have Jackie Martling from the Howard Stern Show, stand-up comedian. And then we're ending it with SNL's musical audio engineer, Josiah Gluck. So we tie it in at the end of the month. But thank you all for listening. Don, I appreciate it. And everyone, have a good day.
Wow.